Hey guys, it's Chris. So I wanted to put together a video on the House of the Undying and Dany's visions. I think there's a lot of confusion out there between show watchers only versus book readers and how much was cut out of the show. So I wanted to kind of put together, in this case, a video series on the House of the Undying and her visions and what they potentially mean. What I want to do is, instead of trying to cram this all to one video, I'm going to make it 4 quicker videos and a lot easier to understand versus trying to cram it all into one where I'm just reading all visions and explaining one right after the other. It can kind of all blur together because in the House of the Undying, Dany has about 24 visions or something like that. Compared to the show, she only had a few and most of everything else was cut out, mainly because they didn't want to spoil anything. Some of these are memories, some of these are prophetic. For example, she has a vision of the Red Wedding. I'm sure they didn't want to take away any shock value from when they aired the episode. So what I'm going to do is divide these visions into 4 parts. And the first set's going to be what I call the State of Westeros. And this is basically the set where Dany is being shown the current state of Westeros and a little bit about what she needs to do and things to look out for, because this is, after all, the land she's going to essentially conquer, or at least that's her goal. The second set of visions will be the visions of the Undying, because this is when she actually reaches the Undying in the House of the Undying, and they give her a specific set of prophecies in groups of 3. The third group would be what I would call Dany's titles, because they give her 3 different titles, and those 3 titles are Daughter of Death, Slayer of Lies, and Bride of Fire. And then the last set I'll just call the quick visions. These are the visions that came last, and they became faster and faster as Dany was about to leave the House of the Undying. And those are pretty much just memories, but there is a little prophetic piece in there as well. Again, big differences from the books compared to the show. So in the books, she goes in with Drogon on her shoulder, and in the show, she's going in looking for her dragons who had been stolen from her. The warlock told her to go in and always take the door to the right. She comes to a series of doors before she gets into any particular rooms. And the first vision reads like this. In one room, a beautiful woman sprawled naked on the floor while 4 little men crawled over her. One was pumping between her thighs. Another savaged her breast, worrying at the nipples with his red, wet mouth, tearing and chewing. So this vision is commonly believed to be representative of Westeros itself, and the 4 men represent the 4 kings of Westeros at the time. Keep in mind of the context here, her visions in the House of the Undying happened in a Clash of Kings, which was only the 2nd book in the entire series. So there were 5 kings, then Renly was killed. So when she sees this vision, Renly's already dead, so that leaves 4, which would be Balon Greyjoy, Robb Stark, King of the North, King Joffrey, and Stannis. So I subscribe to this belief. I think it's pretty common belief among Ice and Fire nerds that this is basically just the representation of what's going on in Westeros and how the War of the 5 Kings, or now the 4 kings in this case, are essentially tearing shit up in Westeros and raping the land. The second vision reads like this. Farther on, she came upon a feast of corpses. Savagely slaughtered, the feasters lay strewn across overturned chairs and hacked trestle tables asprawl in pools of congealing blood. Some had lost limbs, even heads. Savage limbs clutched bloody cups, wooden spoons, roast fowl, hills of bread. On a throne above them sat a dead man with the head of a wolf. He wore an iron crown and held a leg of lamb in one hand as a king might hold a scepter, and his eyes followed Dany with mute appeal. So this is commonly believed, and I also believe it's pretty straightforward, this foresaw the Red Wedding. Hindsight, of course, is 20/20, but at the time this did actually prophesize the Red Wedding before it happened. So this is pretty straightforward, not much to add to that. I don't think anybody believes this scene to be any different other than the Red Wedding. And so on to the third vision. I know this room, she thought. She remembered those great wooden beams and carved animal faces that adorned them, and there outside the window, a lemon tree. And there's a little bit more to that as well, where she sees Willem Derry calling for her to come in, saying she's safe and things like that. But this is generally just believed to be a memory of her childhood and apparently Braavos, with the house with the red door that we see so often in her memories, and this fucking lemon tree out front that we hear about. This kind of breeds the R+L=D theory, which I posted a video about, which I'll link below in the description. There are several passages throughout the book that associate lemons with Dorne, and again, the argument here as far as what feeds into the R+L=D theory is that she potentially spent some time during her childhood in Dorne, as opposed to on Dragonstone, being born there and then shipped over to Braavos, where she apparently lived with the Sea Lord. Now, it is very possible that we're overthinking this, and that she lived with the Sea Lord of Braavos in his palace, and he had a big yard full of tropical trees, maybe even greenhouses that could support tropical trees like lemon trees, and that she just has a memory of that. However, she always remembers a big house with a red door as opposed to a giant ass palace with a red door. It's always described as foggy, salty, smelling like shit. I mean, after all, it is on the sea. It's basically a giant fishing town. This is kind of what feeds into those theories as well, but I think either way, regardless, this is simply pointing to her memory of that, throwing that back at us again as another reminder of something's going on with her past that we don't really know about. And the fourth vision in this set reads like this. Beyond loomed a cavernous stone hall, the largest she had ever seen. The skulls of dead dragons looked down from its walls. Upon a towering barbed throne sat an old man in rich robes, an old man with dark eyes and long silver gray hair. Let him be king over charred bones and cooked meats, he said to a man below him. Let him be the king of ashes. So this is pretty straightforward, I think. This is commonly thought to be Aerys, King Aerys, the Mad King, her father, when he was ordering King's Landing to be burned by wildfire. This is kind of corroborated when Jaime is telling the story to Brienne about why he became the quote-unquote Kingslayer. He killed Aerys in order to prevent this from happening. So this kind of collaborates this. It's pretty straightforward. It seems to be her seeing her father in the past as he gave the order to burn King's Landing right before his downfall, right before his death. She and Barristan were talking on the balcony in Meereen. She had mentioned that she realized that the king had actually earned his nickname, the Mad King, so she knew her father was fucking crazy. And the final vision in this first set pertaining to the state of Westeros and perhaps the future of Westeros reads like this. The man had her brother's hair, but he was taller, and his eyes were dark indigo rather than lilac. Aegon, he said to a woman nursing a newborn babe in a great wooden bed. What better name for a king? Will you make a song for him, the woman asked. He has a song, the man replied. He is the prince that was promised, and his is the song of ice and fire. He looked up when he said it, and his eyes met Dany, and it seemed as if he saw her standing there beyond the door. There must be one more, he said, though whether he was speaking to her or the woman in the bed she could not say. The dragon has 3 heads. So yes, this is obviously referring to Rhaegar. Now it says he's taller and has different color eyes than Rhaegar did, so I'm not exactly sure what that means as far as taller, but this is obviously referring to Rhaegar talking to his wife Ilya Martell when they had their children Rhaenys and Aegon, who he thought was 2 of the 3 heads of the dragon. He then of course looks up at Dany and says he is the prince that was promised while he's looking at her, so that's kind of interesting. But he also mentions there must be another. The dragon must have 3 heads. I mean, he literally mentions the prince that was promised prophecy here that could be simply her seeing a past conversation with his wife regarding the prophecy. But in my opinion, this is pointing to there's one missing here. The prophecy has to be fulfilled with 3. And that to me points to Jon Snow, because I do follow the R plus L equals J theory, which I think has been confirmed at least in season 5 on the show. Now obviously this has changed since both of these children were killed during the sack of King's Landing, except for potentially Aegon, who may be young Griff, which is a character that's not even been in the show. They completely scrubbed from the show. I'll get into that a little bit more in another vision, but I think that this is basically just kind of introducing us to the fact that there's something going on with another child somewhere. It also could just be referring to Dany being ahead of the dragon. Of course, since this has changed and those children are dead, most likely, then that means there still has to be 3 heads to the dragon, and who could those be? We're going to potentially see this prophecy fulfilled with Dany, Jon, and perhaps somebody else that we don't know of yet, or somebody that may be standing right in front of us. I know a lot of people want that to be Tyrion, and that's yet to be seen. I don't quite buy into that yet. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. I will link in my video on Jon Snow and Azor Ahai and the R plus L equals D theory video in the description below, because it is relevant to this prince that was promised prophecy, Azor Ahai, whatever you want to call it. Again, I think it's the same prophecy. So thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support, you guys, and we'll see you in part 2.